The most controversial cars of the 2000s. Hey guys! Even though Y2K feels like it was just a few years ago, the truth is that we are 2 full decades into the 21st century. For those 20 years, the world has changed very much indeed. The chances are that you're watching this video on your mobile device. Well, 20 years ago there were no smartphones, and no YouTube, no social media networks, or Bitcoin. Feeling old, aren't you? The car industry has drastically changed as well. In the late 90s, Rover was still making cars, and Saab still existed. SUVs were just a niche thing, and most of the vehicles sold in the world were good old sedans. Although we must admit that we got our fair share of great cars during the last 20 years, we also got some pretty controversial ones. Not all of them were sales flops, some were very successful, but all were met by disbelief and criticism and remained automotive black sheep for years to come. Number 1. The Porsche Cayenne. Porsche fans are generally a bunch of conservative snobs, concentrating on their car's originality and praising the air-cooled engines of yesterday. When Porsche introduced the Cayenne, they were outraged, along with most of the car-buying public. Before 2003, Porsche never made a 4-door model, let alone a full-size luxury SUV with 911-inspired fascia. It was an utter travesty in their eyes, and most car journalists criticized the model since it ruined Porsche's carefully built reputation as a sports car brand of the highest order. However, we can now say that this was a brilliant move. The Cayenne turned out to be a bestseller, generated an enormous amount of revenue for the company, and influenced the industry in so many ways. In fact, Porsche's SUV line, the Cayenne and the Macan, are the only reasons why the company can afford to build a 911. Number 2. The Toyota Prius. The first Prius was a 1997 model, but in 2003 the second generation was offered globally, and the world outside Japan was introduced to a hybrid car concept. Almost immediately, the Prius generated a lot of criticism from the press since the car had substandard driving dynamics, terrible CTV transmission, poor performance, a high price, and a terrible design. It didn't help that Toyota tried to explain that the car was designed to achieve the best fuel economy possible, the lowest drag coefficient, and that the whole point of the Prius was to be an environmentally friendly vehicle. It immediately became the laughingstock of the car community. Thanks to Toyota-lobbied government initiatives, tax returns, and free parking permits in some areas, the Prius became the favorite vehicle of environmentally cautious Hollywood stars, which helped achieve sales of over 4 million units. Number 3. The Chrysler PT Cruiser. The success of the PT Cruiser is a clear case of inherited memory, which is the psychological phenomenon of taking someone else's memory and making it your own. In 2001, Chrysler presented a faux retro compact car that wasn't very good to drive, didn't have a lot of interior space, it looked weird, but for some reason, people bought it like crazy. The trick was that the PT Cruiser reminded them of the good old days, the 40s and the 50s, classic movies and old-school Hollywood glamour, even though none of the PT Cruiser's buyers were old enough to remember that. Chrysler managed to sell over 1.3 million units to middle-class buyers worldwide, despite the car being substandard in terms of handling, performance, and always came bottom in magazine tests. It was one of the first cars to adopt the modern consumerist doctrine that image is far more important than the essence. Number 4. The Renault Avantine. In 2001, Renault combined 2 polar opposites of the car spectrum to answer the question that nobody asked: what would a minivan coupe look like? Even though the Avantine was an engineering marvel and nobody had ever managed to make such a long hardtop with a glass roof, the whole car was utterly pointless. Theoretically, it had as much room as a minivan, but it had 2 enormous doors, no B-pillar, and a smaller trunk. It was expensive, complicated, and full of unique systems. As with most French cars of the era, it was bound to give you trouble. It was envisioned as a Gran Turismo coupe, but it drove like an ordinary Espace, and its minivan shape had questionable elegance. As you would expect, Renault struggled to sell 8,500 examples and discontinued the model after just 2 years on the market. Number 5. The Jaguar XType. The idea behind the Jaguar XType was sound, and the car itself wasn't that bad. But it was controversial right from the start, criticized by the motoring press and ignored by the buyers, which ultimately led to its demise. Back in the late 90s, Jaguar was owned by Ford. When the downsizing project was announced, Jaguar engineers looked for a suitable platform from the parent company. Ford's CD132 platform was a perfect choice, which made the X-Type project inexpensive and quick. However, that was the problem. The X-Type was an ordinary Ford Mondeo in an expensive suit. Even though it looked elegant and had a cool retro-inspired design, the Jaguar X-Type never escaped the fact that it was nothing more than an economy Ford behind all that chrome and leather trim. Number 6. The Hummer H2. The first years of the 21st century brought us a bling culture, an automotive movement of people looking for opulence, questionable style, and over-the-top appearance bordering on kitsch. Their vehicle of choice was a 2003 to 2009 Hummer H2. This SUV personified everything wrong with the car industry and car owners' psychology. It was enormous, terribly fuel inefficient, expensive, not very interesting to drive, and not as roomy and comfortable as you would expect. It was bought by individuals that watched too many rap videos, Russian gangsters, and pop stars. What's shocking to us is how popular this car was with said characters, and how many General Motors managed to sell, even in Europe where it was not officially sold. The last recession thankfully killed the H2, but the latest reports say that it will be returning as an electric pickup. So, there you are. Thanks for watching. Cheers!